Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to be starting the Ncert book, Indian Economic Development. This book is of 40 marks in the board examination. This book comprises of those chapters which broadly tell you about the economic scenario right from the British time, that is 1947, when we got independence, and up to today. It tells you about what are the problems, the challenges that India is facing. It tells you about the Indian economic history. It tells you after independence what are the major reforms that we took up. Again in 1991 we took up some major reforms. There are some issues like infrastructure, rural development, poverty, employment, sustainable development. All these issues are going to be discussed in this particular book. We are going to start with the first chapter, Indian Economy on the Eve of Independence. Children, in this particular chapter, we are going to be covering these particular topics. Basically, we are going to be discussing what were the features of the Indian economy on the eve of independence. What was the agricultural scenario at that time? How were the industries on the eve of independence, that is around 1947, before 1947. We are going to see what was the foreign trade and how India's huge foreign trade wealth was being drained off because of the Britishers. We are going to see the demographic conditions as to what and how the people were living in that time. What was the occupational structure? This was the occupational structure, the occupational sector, that is how was the primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector, and what was the infrastructure set up by the Britishers for the Indian. How were the roads, the railways, the postal, the inland water supply, etc. So this particular book is a little more interesting, children, because it's more of theory, right? It's more of stories, more of history, etc. Now we are going to discuss one topic at a time. Children, one important word of caution and note. Children, you have to follow the Ncert book very strictly, because even in the boards, the paper is set for the Ncert 1. Second, there are a lot of MCQs, so you have to learn in between the lines. It is not all that difficult as you feel it. So I've done the marking also. Like this, you have to question wise you're going to be doing it. Now if you look at on the page, the very first page, that is page number 4 here of the book where we start, right? Now the story begins like this. That when we got independent on 15th August 1947, the Britishers were prior to that ruling us. Now, the purpose why the Britishers were ruling us and the purpose of the colonial rule in India was to basically make India an economy where a country where it becomes a very big raw material supplier to Britain. Because उस time Britain में industrial development हो रही थी. There was an industrial base which was being developed. So Britishers wanted to supply all the raw material from India, because India is had abundant resources. Wanted to supply all the raw material from India to Britain and make Britain a very big industrial base. Right? Now we're going to understand. If you can see, I've marked it there. And then here, a very important question: what were the features of the Indian economy, right? Or Indian economy at the time of the colonial rule? Children, there are 2 points which are taken here. It's normally said colonial rule. It is normally said at the time of, on the eve of independence. It is normally said under British rule. So in तीनों का मतलब यही है कि ये first chapter में से question है, right? So the features of the Indian economy at the time of colonial rule or under British rule. सबसे पहले feature was the Indian economy was a very independent economy for the British rule. That's the first point. The second point was we were totally dependent on agriculture, right? Most of the livelihood of the people was from agriculture. Third, we did have a manufacturing sector. We did have industrial base, but the industrial base was very little. We had the economy's manufacturing sector was very little. Fourth point, here, India particularly was very known for its handicraft. The handicraft of India was very good at that time. right? Especially in the fields of cotton, silk, textiles. We had a lot of handicrafts on the precious stones. The metalwork was very good, right? And then their products made in India were really enjoyed all over the world. They had a very good reputation because of the very good quality they were manufactured with, the very high standards of craftsmanship, and people really imported a lot of goods from India. So these were the features of the Indian economy at the time of the colonial rule. Now the question comes, what was the main aim of the colonial government? वो क्या करना चाहते थे, right? And what were the economic policies that they adopted for India? एक बात देखना, colonial government, British government का एक ही purpose था. They wanted to protect and promote the economic interest of their home country. When I say home country, it means Britain. They only wanted to protect their country. They wanted to promote their country. तो उन्होंने जितनी भी policies बनाई थी, right? That was basically to develop their home country, right? They were never bothered to develop the Indian economy. Now, because of this, that they wanted to develop their countries, they wanted to protect their countries. What did they transform India into? They transformed India into a supplier of raw material, as I've already told you, right? Because India had abundant resources, and because India was a supplier of raw material, now obviously the goods were being manufactured in Britain. When the goods were being manufactured in Britain, all the British goods were being supplied to India. Now they wanted to make India into a sprawling market. We're going to do this word ahead. A sprawling market into the consumer finished goods coming from Britain. So purpose क्या था economic policies का? One, to protect and promote their own country. Second, to make India into a supplier of raw material and a consumer of Britain's final finished goods. Now, if you want to know the progress of any country, development of any country, there are two economic parameters on the basis of which you can do so. One is national income, second is per capita income. We have all studied national income and per capita income. We are very well versed with these words. Now, there were economists who looked into these particular areas. There were economists like Dadabhai Naoroji, William Digby, all these names. Now, these were the people who actually did a lot of research on the national income and per capita income. Now, if you understand the per capita income and national income at that time, it was less than the GDP growth rate. The real GDP growth was less than 2%. And the per capita income was just about 0.5%, just half a percent, maybe a little less than 0.5% also. This was the growth rate of the economy at the time of colonial rule. Coming to the next topic, that is agriculture sector. Let us understand in detail, how was the agricultural sector during the colonial rule? I have put it in points, children, to have a better understanding. The very first point to understand about agriculture is, in 1947, around 1947 and prior to that, we were normally an agrarian economy. When you say agrarian, it means the entire economy was dependent on agriculture as a main source of livelihood. Almost 85% of the Indian population lived in the villages, and their livelihood was dependent on agriculture, right? Now the problem was, because even if such a big population was dependent on agriculture, even after such a big population being dependent on agriculture, the agriculture scenario was very stagnant, right? Agriculture progress was very rare, very basic. It was more or less stagnant. Now the productivity of agriculture also was very low. क्यों? क्योंकि उस टाइम उनके पास कोई साधन नहीं थे, कोई ऑटोमेशन नहीं थी, कोई कुछ था नहीं उनके पास, नो ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन, एंड मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट क्योंकि ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट डिड नॉट डू एनीथिंग टू डेवलप द इंडियन इकोनॉमी. एज आई टोल्ड यू, if you watch movies like Lagan, etc., you'll find all these what I'm telling you exactly there. उसके बाद the next point which you need to understand was the agriculture was stagnant, undoubtedly. But why was it stagnant? There are two very important reasons for the agriculture to be stagnant at that time. Remember, these are the 2 points: land settlement and revenue settlement. I shall explain land settlement to you first in detail. Land settlement was, that time the entire agricultural scenario was under the zamindari system. You know what is zamindari system? कुछ अमीर agriculturists होते थे, right? और वो जमींदार थे. And the areas, Bengal presidency and this entire area, the eastern states were all under the zamindari system. The zamindari system में होता क्या था? The land was given to them by the British government. लेकिन जमींदार खुद कल्टीवेट नहीं करते थे. वो क्या करते थे? They would give that land to the cultivators. Cultivators को टिलर्स भी कहते थे उस टाइम. Cultivators कौन होते थे? The गरीब बेचारे farmers. Now these गरीब farmers were the cultivators actually under the zamindars, right? तो the zamindars gave them the land और उनको बोलते थे इस जगह पर खेतीबाड़ी करो एंड जो भी आउटपुट होगा was given to the zamindars. एंड उन्होंने उस जगह को इम्प्रूव करने के लिए या उसकी कंडीशन को इम्प्रूव करने के लिए उन्होंने कुछ भी नहीं किया था, जैसे है वैसे दिया. द जमींदार्स वेर ओनली एंड ओनली बॉदर्ड अबाउट द रेंट. रेंट मतलब जो जगह उन्होंने उनको दी है उसका रेंट लेते थे, चाहे उस पर whether there was good output or not, whether the cultivation was good or not, उन्हें कोई मतलब नहीं था, उन्हें सिर्फ रेंट से मतलब था. And you can imagine the tension, the problems a farmer would have कि there was no irrigation facilities, they were dependent on land, उनको लगान भी देना था, लगान को रेंट कहते थे to the zamindars. And बेचारे खाएंगे क्या और उनको देंगे क्या. So this was zamindari system. zamindari system के कारण nothing improved in the agricultural sector. The second was revenue settlement. Now when the land was given to the zamindars by the British government was not bothered कि वो cultivate किससे करा रहे हैं. The Britishers wanted a rent, a fixed amount of revenue on specific dates by the zamindars to the British government. They were not bothered कि whether the crop was good or not. Now if they did not do so, the zamindars, if they did not deposit the fixed amount of rent to these Britishers on specified dates, then the zamindars would lose the right on that particular land. Now because of these two reasons, the agricultural output was actually very low. In addition to this, there are problems like low level of technology. There was no technology, everything was manual. There was no use of fertilizers. There was, they were dependent on only rainfall as a means of water supply. These reasons added to the problems apart from zamindari system and land settlement. There was another thing which was coming up was commercialization of agriculture. What do you mean by commercialization of agriculture? पहले तो सस्टेन इकोनॉमी होती थी. उसमें क्या होता था कि जो भी कुछ फार्मर्स ने प्रोड्यूस किया वो अपने पास रखते थे. लेकिन अब ब्रिटिशर्स ने क्या किया? दे वेंट इन फॉर कमर्शलाइजेशन. कमर्शलाइजेशन में दो चीजें होगी. एक, दे स्टार्टेड प्रोड्यूसिंग कैश क्रॉप्स. You know what are cash crops? Like your cotton, your indigo, silk. They started producing these particular crops instead of food crops. Now these particular crops were being sold across the country and they were taken away to Britain to earn a revenue. Now because of commercialization, poor farmers, उनके पास food crops की scarcity होगी. They could not have enough food crops with them. So because of this, the economic conditions of the farmers worsened rather than that. But despite all these problems, the agricultural system, the irrigation system was really very bad, right? The irrigation wanted money for terrace farming, flood control, drainage, etc., which all was not available. If you see here, a few of the farmers tried to change their cropping patterns. They shifted from food crops to cash crops, right? And a large section of the tenants, small farmers, sharecroppers, they did not have resources, they did not have technology which would be an incentive for them to produce or invest in agriculture. Let's quickly have a recap of the agriculture sector during the British rule or the colonial rule. सबसे पहला point was we were in agrarian economy. Right? Agrarian economy means 85% of the population was dependent on agriculture. Second, the agricultural output was very less. There was stagnation. It experienced stagnation. Third, the agricultural productivity was very low. Fourth, the reasons for stagnation were: 1. Land settlement. What is land settlement? I told you, there was the zamindari system. They were only concerned about profits. They did not cultivate the land themselves. They gave it to the cultivators to cultivate the land, and they did not improve the condition of the land or the agriculture. Their main aim was to collect interest from the farmers. Then we had the revenue settlement, which was another big problem. Revenue settlement is, there were fixed dates, there were fixed days and fixed amount which the zamindars had to pay to the Britishers for the land given by the Britishers, and if they failed to do so, they would lose the right of that particular land. That was again a problem where they were troubling the cultivators. Then you have added problems in the agricultural sector, like low level of technology, lack of irrigational facilities, very little use of fertilizers. All these problems added to the low productivity of agriculture. Another very important thing which came up was commercialization of agriculture, which was very bad for the farmers, growing of cash crops rather than food crops. Because of this, the farmers could not improve their economic conditions, right? In spite of all this, right, a little progress made in irrigation. Agriculture really needed a lot of investment in terrace farming, flood control, drainage, etc. Many of the farmers tried to shift their cropping patterns from food crops to cash crop, but it was not really very successful, right? And very marginalized farmers, or sharecroppers, or small farmers, or those who were tenants, they did not have any technology, or they did not have any resources where they could invest in agriculture or improve their conditions. The second very important area to be discussed under the British rule was the industrial sector. Children, I've done two. One, I've introduced the topic to you, and I've discussed the features of the economic situation during British rule. Then we discussed agriculture sector in detail. Now we're discussing the industrial sector in detail, how it was during the colonial rule. Before we go detail into discussing about the industrial sector, let us understand again, I'm using the word again because I've repeated this earlier, what was the primary motive of the colonial government behind the policy of systematically de-industrializing. We normally say industrializing, but यहाँ हम कह रहे हैं de-industrializing. क्यों? क्योंकि ब्रिटिशर्स कभी भी इंडिया को industrialized नहीं करना चाहते थे. They always wanted India to be at the feet of the Britishers. So, and this de-industrializing policy was twofold. उनके दो उनके पहलू थे. The first, remember that. Children, you need to be very crisp in your answers. You really get board marks only if you're crisp. One, and it's very simple, to reduce India to a status of mere exporter. मैंने पहले भी बताया आपको, Britishers wanted India to only export raw material to the upcoming industries in Britain. They wanted India to become a feeder economy. What do you mean by feeder? मतलब हम उन्हें पालें, हम यहाँ से feed करें Britishers को, British economy को, by sending the raw material from India, and to make India into a sprawling market. I used this word earlier. A sprawling market for the finished goods which were produced in Britain, right? And Britain के पास कोई और advantage नहीं था. They could only send the goods to India. So they wanted to take away all the raw material from India, produce the goods in Britain by using machines and develop their country there, and send back all those goods into India and force Indians to buy those consumer goods. You know, by this process, this twofold de-industrializing process के कारण, India had made a very bad setback. India had a very bad setback on the handicraft industries. Right? There was a decline in the indigenous handicraft industry. India was known as the Sone ki Chidiya. इंडिया की जो भी इंडस्ट्रीज थी, हैंडीक्राफ्ट इंडस्ट्रीज विच आर वेरी वेरी फेमस अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, वो डिक्लाइन होगी. Why did they decline? Because there was massive unemployment in India. It created massive unemployment. Unemployment तो obviously होगी because Indian consumer market zero हो गई थी. Indian consumer market was replaced by the imported goods, by the machine-made goods, by the cheap goods which were coming in from Britain, and the demand for the locally made goods had decreased. तो उनकी सप्लाई भी कम होगी क्योंकि they were not being produced anymore. So these were the problems that were faced because of the deindustrializing policy in India due to the Britishers. One, there was a decline in the indigenous handicraft industries. Two, there was a lot of unemployment which was created. Three, the demand for Indian consumer goods declined. Four, the supply of locally made goods also declined. Five, the demand for the imports, the cheap manufactured goods from Britain, उनकी डिमांड क्या होगी, बढ़गी. So these were the setbacks faced by the Indian industrial sector during the British rule due to the deindustrializing policy. Then let us understand how the industrial sector developed in India, or what was the scenario of the industrial sector in India at that time. We'll go point by point. One, there was modern industry which was coming up, but the progress of modern industry was very very slow. The progress of modern industry was very very slow. This development confined only to cotton and jute textiles. Means जितनी भी development हो रही थी in the modern industry, that was basically because of jute and cotton textile mills. Jute क्यों? क्योंकि महाराष्ट्र था. कॉटन इसलिए था क्योंकि महाराष्ट्र की तरफ से आ रहा था, एंड जूट वाज बिकॉज ऑफ वेस्ट बंगाल. सो हियर इट्स गिवन हियर बिकॉज ऑफ महाराष्ट्र एंड गुजरात यू हैड कॉटन, एंड जूट वाज बिकॉज ऑफ वेस्ट, in West Bengal there was a lot of industries. Now the iron and steel industry came up in the 20th century. TISCO in 1907. Children, there are a lot of one-marker questions here. Lot of one-marker questions. And you have 10 one-mark questions, so you have to read in between the lines. Now, TISCO was incorporated in 1907, right? And then you had some small industries coming up like paper industry, the cement, and the sugar industries were being set up little bit. You had a few capital good industries also which were coming up. You all know what are capital goods. Capital goods are those goods which further produce goods. Right, so these industries were coming up. That means there were industries like the bread making industry, or probably the steel making. These industries were also coming up over a period of time. लेकिन there was a big problem, children. जितनी भी industries आ रही हैं, these industries could not substitute the traditional handicraft industries of the country. They did contribute to the GDP of the country, but उनकी contribution बहुत कम थी, very very small, right? And another very important thing was the area of operation for the public sector was very less. This sector remained confined only to railways, power generation, communication, ports, and other department undertakings. सरकार इन areas में काम कर रही थी, and बाकी भी private sector also बहुत कम था. Let's quickly have the recap of the industrial scenario during the colonial rule. One, there was a deindustrializing policy. One, making India a mere exporter of raw material, and a sprawling market for the British goods, because of which the handicraft industry declined. When the handicraft industry declined, they had 5 major setbacks I've already discussed with you. The modern industry was developing but very slowly. It was confined to cotton and jute. Cotton in the Maharashtra and Gujarat, jute in the Bengal area. Then a little bit of other industries also came up. We had the TISCO manufacturing iron and steel in 1907. Then maybe in many industries like sugar, cement, paper also came up. There were a few capital good industries which began at that time. And the capital good industries are basically those industries which produce articles for current consumption. There were a few industries of these, but as I've told you, it was not a substitute for the entire displacement of the handicraft industries. The contribution of the new industrial sector was very, very small. There were many drawbacks, that is, the role of the public sector was very limited. It was limited only to railways, power generation, communication, ports, departments, etc.